Welcome to 2022 Conscious Life Expo. I know we're all waiting for this event tonight with Linda Moulton Howe. Just go ahead and applaud now. Let's go. Let's go. And since we're running a little late, normally I would tell some stories and everything that we love about Linda. I'm not going to waste my time with that. Of course, we know about Earth Files. We know about the history of Coast to Coast. She's been producing and appearing on Ancient Aliens since season 1. I think she's been to every country in the world. She has done all of this for our community. But here's the crazy part. The young lady celebrated her 80th birthday last week. Linda, don't come up yet. Don't come up yet. Now, as you think about that, a couple of months ago, we were here in Los Angeles filming our new movie starring Linda called The Observers. But that's not what was special about that. What was special about it was hanging out with Whitley Strieber. Whitley, stand up and say hello to everybody. And so we're there and we're filming. And then one night, Whitley goes, I got to shoot first thing in the morning, church. I'm going to go home. So he leaves, and it left Richard Dolan, myself, and Linda Moulton Howe at the dinner table at a restaurant at about 9 o'clock at night. Now, I want you to picture this. We're on the 20th floor, Whitley, 25th floor, out looking over Bel Air and Beverly Hills. We're up at the top. How majestic is that? I'm like, my life is complete. I'm sitting here with Linda and Richard and looking out over Los Angeles with the lights in the city. It's 9 o'clock at night. We're having cocktails and dessert and cake and this and the staff. We're alone. We have the whole restaurant to ourselves, do we not? It was amazing. But this is what happened. That was at 9 o'clock. Restaurant closed at 10. Richard and Linda and I are still drinking and talking. Then it's 11 o'clock. Then it's 12 o'clock. Then it's 1 o'clock. Then it's 2 o'clock. We talked for 6 hours until 2:30 in the morning. And I had to pull Linda out of the restaurant. And this was the last thing she said as we're going. She goes, no, I got one more thing to say. I said, Linda. And we took it to the bottom of the stairs at the hotel. And we continued down there, did we not? And that is Linda Moulton Howe. I love her to death. She's the very best. I'm off this stage. Please, 2022 Conscious Life Expo welcomes Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, come on. True story, though.
Yeah, but it's like the universe we're in. There's just no end to the questions. There's no end to the answers and the speculations. And you get some of us together in a room when we haven't seen each other for a while, and it could go on for 48 hours, I swear. I want to thank Chris and this tech crew. We have had a problem and have a problem. He has at least made me functional. But in this hybrid that we are working on because of a technical problem, it's not going to fill the screen. And I hope that it's all going to play. And we're going to discover this as we go, which often seems to be the baptism of conferences, that we have to find our compatible technologies. So the other thing I'm realizing is I have so much light in my face, I can't really see my script. I'm going to jerry-rig. If you're sympathetic with the experiment of doing it in this light, I wonder, you guys, I may have to turn something on, because I can't really see the script very well. And this is the first in the matter world for me since 2019. That'll do it, Chris. Beautiful. Thank you. 20,000 gold stars in heaven to Chris. First, I do want to thank one of the dearest people in the world is Serena Taylor. And what Serena does for Conscious Life Expo every year with speakers and organization and administration, you 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 gold stars. Give her a big hand. And that she and Robert Quicksilver have gotten Conscious Life Expo at least sustained through the horrible COVID. And at this point, as we are meeting here in early February, there is growing buzz, certainly among people that I know who work for the government. And what is the burbling noise? Is it a room next to us? Oh, okay. It's like we are underwater. What? There really is a growing buzz among professional people that I know in aerospace, in physics, people that I've known for some time. And what I'm saying is, not for a blurb on CNN, what I'm beginning to see and hear for the very first time in my professional life are people who do have extremely crucial work related to extraterrestrial biological entities, even if that has not been announced to this planet yet. And one person called me about 3 weeks ago, and nothing official, but said, just want you to know, it looks like behind the scenes that we're headed for public hearing, public congressional hearing on UFO UAPs this year. No timeline. It was more like you may consider the possibility that you could contribute something if we had a hearing. And those are words to my ears like genuine water that you just feel like we've been out in the cold and disconnected from what's been going on for so long, and now it feels like for the first time, maybe we're going to get that headline, we're not alone in the universe, we never have been alone in the universe. And a few weeks ago, on December 15th, 2021, you probably heard about this newly authorized, it's called in the press release. Very interesting that they put this word in the press release from the Pentagon, permanent. They've never used a word like permanent about UFOs in the last 80 years. Quote, permanent UFO office in the Pentagon, close quote, became official with the passage of the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act. Its goals are to coordinate UFO, UAP data collection so that it can be accessible and cross-referenced for several American federal intelligence agencies and departments, as well as our international allies. And the argument is that more and more global analysts might help officials determine where UFOs, UAPs come from and whether they are a threat to Earth life. Lou Elizondo brought up the threat in the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, with everybody saying what was the threat in that title. And again, they're bringing into this press release that word permanent UFO and threat to Earth life. So finally, after 80 years since World War II, when our government knew for a fact, they did know in World War II that astounding unidentified aerial phenomena was not human manufactured. It's at least fair to say now in February 2022 that the US government is slowly acknowledging publicly that there is knowledge and serious concern about the sources, agendas, and threat levels of UFOs that they call unidentified aerial phenomena, and the world public has called UFOs, UAPs, they are one and the same. But the raw truth is that UFOs and ETs have been the big, big, big secret that the American government has covered up since World War II. Military insiders did not want anyone to know that UFO intelligences that range from friendly to neutral to outright hostile are here and out there, and that some have definitely interfered with our American Minuteman nuclear missile sites. Let's see if this is going to work. If I can get, okay. Some whistleblowers have even warned that the United States' first atomic bomb test in July 1945 at White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, followed by 2 other atomic bomb attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan in August of 1945, tore into other dimensions that we humans knew nothing about. And I've been told that is why further explosions of nuclear bombs on Earth had to be stopped by certain extraterrestrial biological entities monitoring our planet from their advanced UFO, UAP aerial craft. Let's hope this works. Homo sapiens sapiens' first test of an atomic bomb goes back to 1945. That's when the United States Manhattan Project in Los Alamos tried out a plutonium atomic bomb on July 16, 1945, at the Trinity site on New Mexico's White Sands Proving Ground. 3 weeks later, on August 6, 1945, the United States dropped another atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. That bomb immediately killed an estimated 80,000 people and lots of animals and plants. 3 days after that, on August 9, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Nagasaki, instantly killing an estimated 40,000 more people and lots more animals and plants. Those 2 atomic bombs ended the United States war with Japan after its attack in December 1941 on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And then, 2 years after that, in early July 1947, back at the White Sands Proving Ground region near Roswell, New Mexico, the commanding officer of the Roswell Army Airfield, Colonel William Blanchard, released teletype news to the local media that a silver disc had crashed near Roswell. This July 8, 1947 headline in the Roswell Daily Record went around the world. Roswell Army Airfield captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. Nuclear physicist and UFO investigator Stanton Friedman told me back in the 1980s that he had information going back to the late 1940s that White Sands Proving Ground was using strong microwave frequencies to try to deliberately interfere with UFOs, and those microwaves might be what caused several of the UFO crashes in southern New Mexico. And it was only a decade after that, on June 6, 1957, the United States tested its first intercontinental ballistic missile, the SM-65 Atlas B. And then, in the decades from 1957 to the 1980s, armed Minuteman nuclear missiles were 60 feet underground, ready to launch from ranges at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Great Falls, Montana, F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, northeastern Colorado and southwestern Nebraska, Minot Air Force Base in Minot, North Dakota, Ellsworth Air Force Base in Newell and Rapid City, South Dakota,
and Whiteman Air Force Base in Jefferson City, Missouri. Eventually, many of those missile fields were deactivated, decommissioned, but there are still 400 Minuteman III nuclear missiles operational at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, and F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming. What most Americans did not know during the 1960s and the 1970s was that UFO UAPs were frequently intruding in those Minuteman nuclear missile fields in dramatic ways. It was in the early 1990s that I learned firsthand from a Boeing engineer that, quote, this is from my own file, it was impossible for those 10 missiles that we built to go offline one by one every second like they did.
It's not working.
Impossible. But it happened, and the
I don't know, it's a problem we have between this, and here. It's working fine here.
Excuse me.
Well,
I also heard that they not only disconnected them, but they would turn them on suddenly. And that
yes.
they would panic to try to shut them down.
Right. Well, we don't have any choice now, but I've got the same earrings on. I have the same shirt on. So we'll go from the digital world to the matter world. And I have the same script that we did there, so that's too bad. Well, what most Americans did not know during the 1960s and the 1970s was that UFO UAPs were frequently intruding in those Minuteman missile nuclear fields in dramatic ways. And it was in the early 1990s that I learned firsthand from a Boeing engineer. He was working at Boeing. He had worked on all of the Minuteman missile silos. I was given a phone number, call. He understands that you would like to understand more about what happened. And he was genuinely helpful. And he told me, quote, this was after he had been there, and he had looked at what was the post-event after each of these missiles went down second by second by second. Quote, it was impossible for those 10 missiles that we built to go offline one by one every second like they did. Impossible. But it happened. And the cause was apparently a UFO that we do not understand and we cannot control, close quote. Last week, I was talking with retired U.S. Air Force Minuteman Missile Launch Control Officer Robert Salas about all of the military eyewitness testimonies of UFOs interfering with our Minuteman nuclear missiles since the 1960s, including his own experience at Malmstrom, and how so many people, including Congress, they do not know any of the hard facts of very advanced intelligence interacting with complete control over our most sensitive, dangerous weapons. And this is the thing that bothers Bob Salas the most. He was there. He was down 80 feet underground. He got the phone call from the security police. We've got a big red UFO, and it is acting like it is stopping right over the gate into the Kilo, I think it was Kilo 7, and the red object, he said, what do we do? And that's how Bob Salas came into this. And he pointed out to me that in addition to Congress not being given any of the information that Boeing and military and CIA, NSA, DIA, everybody knew that there was an active interaction between UFOs and missile sites, that Bob pointed out that the Condon Committee, that we now know was completely phony. It was a trumped-up parallel. There was a top-secret Project Blue Book that was legitimate, that went out of Fort Belvoir and connected with CIA sites that were analyzing materials from UFOs. But the Project Blue Book that the American public was told about and encouraged sometimes to contribute to. This is a fact. You can check it out yourself, and it'll sound impossible today, but this is true. In the Project Blue Book, in December of 1969, in a decade when UFOs were intruding on our most sensitive missile sites, there was not one mention of UFO interference with Minuteman nuclear missiles that had been happening March 16th, March 24th, 1967, 2 years before the publication of Project Blue Book. That's how crazy the policies of secrecy and denial, when there are segments of the population that range from engineers and scientists and doctors to people in military and intel, and they know the truth of what's going on. And it's, in a way, where we are and the mess we are in today, of nobody knowing what is true and what is false, has been evolving through this strange, let them see this kabuki theater, while behind the kabuki theater, we are interacting with, interviewing extraterrestrial biological entities, deliberately shooting down missiles because we want the technology, getting bodies both dead and alive. But to the world in the kabuki theater, it doesn't exist. Now, the one on March 16th, 1967 involved a UFO that was hovering over the Echo Flight missile range when 10 missiles powered down, one every second, over 10 seconds. And then, 1 week later, on March 24th, 1967, Robert Salas, he was a Minuteman I launch officer at Malmstrom. He was 60 feet underground in Launch Control Silo headquarters when an above-ground security guard called him to say that this large red glowing UFO was hovering over the Launch Control Facility's security gate. And then Bob watched as 10 missiles dropped off of alert status, one by one by one, 10 times, 10 seconds, 10 missiles. And this was not the first time. It had happened at Echo Flight 1 week before. In 2005, Bob released the definitive book about those UFO and nuke incidents entitled Fated Giant with co-writer James Klotz. And then Bob released another book in 2014 entitled Unidentified, the UFO Phenomena, How World Governments Have Conspired to Conceal Humanity's Biggest Secret. And one retired U.S. Air Force security policeman that I know, who was an Air Base ground defense specialist on nuclear weapons, said, oh, this is like a jazz presentation. It takes a village. Because I wanted you to see and hear the military guy. I'm at that point. Do you think there's a chance that the video's going to work?
Give me about 3 minutes.
Well, listen, 3 minutes. It's my understanding that the reason that the extraterrestrials care so much about what we do with nuclear, any kind of nuclear technology, is that we are in a multi-dimensional universe, but we have not been shown that. We have not been in country as a democracy. We have not been told the truth even about the bare facts of our government having meetings with extraterrestrial biological entities, let alone telling the American public, for every atomic bomb and hydrogen bomb that we have set off, we have torn into other dimensions and we have caused damage that we know nothing about. And that the non-humans, in this case, the way it's been explained to me, probably the tall whites and the Nordics, is that They are not aggressive toward Homo sapiens sapien, but they are aggressive about anything that we do that's going to affect other life forms, either in this matter universe or in these other dimensions that so far, for most people, those are just words on a piece of paper. But I would think, Whitley, you would probably agree that it's becoming clearer and clearer in physics. Take religion and all of that out. That in physics, it's becoming more and more all the time that there are multi-dimensions, frequencies, other dimensional frequencies.
Yes.
And that, from your point of view, I think as well, could involve some of the avatar frequencies that we could be tearing into mindlessly with bombs.
Something happens when we blow those bombs off that's noticed, and I'm not absolutely sure if we keep doing it, we're going to be very happy about the outcome.
Right. And so there is a really strong physical reason for why other intelligences that are very, very advanced and ancient compared to us do not want this baby civilization on planet Earth that has never been told the truth about much of anything when it comes to the relationship of the cosmos to this solar system and this planet and the evolution of what has happened to life here.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Regarding what you're talking about, and how Stephen Hawking was afraid of current research and science that is being conducted underground regarding the God particle, and being able to rip into multi dimensions and create a ripple effect throughout the universe. He was worried about that before he died.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that?
Whitley, would you know anything more about?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear it very clearly.
About us messing with the God particle and ripping into multi dimensions. Stephen Hawking had mentioned he was concerned about that.
Well, you know, we have a situation where right now it's becoming clearer that there is at least a mirror universe right here. I've personally been in it, so I know it exists. And if we generate enough energy very suddenly here, I think it's highly likely that it affects that other world. I would think so. And Stephen Hawking he never got to the issue of the mirror universe, but there's a lot of science about it, that it almost has to be there. It has to exist. And since I have seen it and been in it physically in a number of different ways, that means there's a connection between us. And what Linda is saying is, I have a feeling that if you do something energetic enough here, it's going to blast through that into that other world. Absolutely. I think it's a high probability. And what's interesting is I'm not sure how able they are to stop us. I think they're trying, but obviously their abilities are constrained, or there would be more change. Because right now what we're dealing with is a change in, we always had mutually assured destruction for 50 years, where if you fired first, we were going to hit you with everything we had. But now the Chinese have developed a weapon, a hypersonic missile, that travels so close, so low, that it's not going to be detected by existing radar systems, meaning that it can destroy, like those Minuteman sites that they just talked about, before they can be launched, before we even know it's coming. That's incredibly dangerous. Because it puts the United States in a position of having to decide to push the button before we know we have to. And
What do you both have to say? Actually,
let this is Linda's view.
It's all right. I'm grateful for the help because
That's okay.
we are up against Digital failure. Except this guy is a miracle worker.
Credit goes to Otto on this one.
We may have something solved here. But Whitley, you have a probably more seasoned information in this area. And if you stood in front of that microphone while he is doing this and finish what you're saying, then we'll segue and hopefully you'll be able to hear now the voices of my military people.
The jazz show goes on. I can talk very specifically about my experiential. Is this on? Yes. My experiences in this area. I was at the Lakota Sioux Reservation in Pine Ridge in the summer of 2019, and I was riding in a car with a bunch of people. Alan Steinfeld is not in the room, but he was in the car when I closed my eyes because it was a long drive and I was tired. And to my astonishment, when I closed my eyes, I saw another version of the world around me, another version of it, and not just flashing past, but in incredible detail. And I thought to myself, my word, what can this be? And I would look out the window with my eyes closed and see another version of the world going past. And I opened my eyes and it was this world. And when I closed my eyes and looked up, I saw the sky, not the roof of the car. And the most extraordinary thing happened was this. At Pine Ridge, the road is graded. The Bureau of Indian Affairs has provided them with this graded highway. But in the world I was seeing in the other version, it's not like that. It's an old road, a carriage road. The other world is very much not like this one. It's not as advanced technologically, but I have a feeling the technology, that what they have in terms of their science is far more advanced than where we are. In any case, you would see, when I closed my eyes, I would see the carriage road. When the highway went across a grade and the carriage road went down when my eyes were closed, it felt exactly like the car had taken off and was flying. And I thought to myself, this is no ordinary hallucination. You don't hallucinate like this. I know a hell of a lot, as you can imagine, about hallucinations, having dealt with this whole issue of is it a hallucination or not for years. And this was new. It went on for 3 days, and it was just extraordinary. And when I got home, I began to look into this because I had understood parallel universes as being probably existing. The physics is pretty solid, but not here in the same space we're in. But all of a sudden, this thing, and then I discovered the idea of the mirror universe is there's a lot of very advanced science about this. So it's probably, in fact, I would say it is real. Because the other thing is when I got home, I was, of course, thinking about this, trying to make it happen again, and it sort of was a little bit, but not as strongly as it had been at Pine Ridge. And then suddenly, one morning, I was just waking up, and then I was riding a bicycle, just like that. Starting to wake up out of bed and then riding a bike, big as life, on Montana Avenue, near where I live, going down toward the ocean. My apartment is about a mile from the ocean. And everything was similar but different in subtle ways. Like instead of the regular red light, yellow light, green light, it had 2 square lights at the end of the street, which tees into a street that overlooks the ocean. 2 square lights with arrows on them. And the arrows, I knew when they were green, that meant you could turn in that direction. And there was a cell phone in my pocket. I called a friend, and I was telling him, listen, it's incredible what's happened. And I was describing this, and he says, Whitley, there's nothing I don't already know. And I thought, of course, I'm talking to him in this universe. I'm telling him about things that are in his everyday life. And then the next thing I knew, I was back in my room. And I was thinking, holy God, how can it be like this?
Killed an estimated
Are we
80,000
ready, Linda?
people
Linda?
and lots of
Almost
animals
finished.
and
Okay,
plants.
all right.
Three
And I
days.
ended up back in the other universe, but this time I was in a slightly different version of my own car. And I thought, my God, now I'm going to go driving in this world and see what this is. I drove and turned down on Ocean Avenue off of Montana, was immediately pulled over by a policeman who was very sweet and who said, we need to be sure you know the rules of the road before you can drive here. In other words, he wasn't excited about my appearance. It happens apparently a lot, I would be my guess. We flow back and forth between these worlds. And he gave me, on a clipboard, he gave me a sheet of questions and answers, a Q&A. It was like a little driving test. Only the script was unreadable to me. It was not English. It was some other totally different script. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't read this. And he looked at me very sweetly, and the next thing I was standing in the middle of my living room, back. And I thought, shit! and that was the last time I was there. But if I concentrate, I can often see it in certain places, especially if there's a lot of sunlight. The sunlight seems to help. But if that's that close, if this is literally so close that the distance between us is next to nothing, if we blow off an atomic bomb here, what happens there in that lovely world? Because I have to tell you, looking into it has become the most lovely experience of my life. I love doing that. I don't do it often because unfortunately I messed up one of my eyes doing it, and nothing to do with them, and it's a long, complicated story, but it's there, here. You ready?
Almost.
Okay. But
At least we got it going.
no, I know they come in here. I know they do. But what they can do here is an entirely different question, because I also know there's another version of me there. And one of the things that is so constraining is I think my soul and his soul changed bodies. That's why I was there in the physical a couple of times. Now, what if when we dream, for example, at night, maybe sometimes we're not dreaming at all. Maybe we're in that other universe. Maybe we've changed bodies with the other version of ourselves.
And now,
In conclusion, then,
yes,
the human species is huge. It's extraordinary. And it fills this universe. This is why when you're close to the visitors, they say, don't think about different species. There's only one human species and many different races.
right. And now, Whitley's great question, what do they do here for real? Try bringing up the audio now. And how so many
It's in
people,
sync.
including Congress, do not know the hard facts of very advanced intelligences interacting with complete control over our most sensitive, dangerous weapons. Bob Salas pointed out that the phony Condon Committee report that closed down Project Blue Book in December of 1969 did not even mention the dramatic UFO interferences with Minuteman nuclear missiles only 2 years before, on March 16th and March 24th, 1967, at Malmstrom Air Force Base. The one on March 16th, 1967, involved a UFO that was hovering over the Echo flight missile range when 10 missiles powered down, one every second over 10 seconds. And then, only 1 week later, on March 24th, 1967, Robert Salas, a Minuteman I launch officer at Malmstrom Air Force Base's Oscar flight, was 60 feet underground in Launch Control's silo headquarters when an above-ground security guard called him to say that a large, red, glowing UFO was hovering over the Launch Control facility's security gate. And suddenly, 10 missiles dropped off alert status then, one by one every second, just like what happened at Echo Flight only 1 week before. In 2005, Bob released the definitive book about those UFO and nuke incidents entitled Faded Giant with co-writer James Klotz. Bob also released another book in 2014 entitled Unidentified, the UFO Phenomenon, How World Governments Have Conspired to Conceal Humanity's Biggest Secret. One retired U.S. Air Force security policeman that I know, who was an Air Base ground defense specialist on nuclear weapons. He is Mario Anthony Woods, Jr., 22 years old in this 1977 photo during his U.S. Air Force work. Mario is now 66 years old, but 44 years ago, in November of 1977, he was a senior airman security specialist and policeman in nuclear weapons who witnessed dramatic UFO activity over Ellsworth Air Force Base, a whole decade after Robert Salas's March 24th, 1967 experience at Oscar Flight, when 10 nukes powered down every second for 10 seconds. That was at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Great Falls. And then at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, in November 1977, he was on a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. night shift, and that's when Senior Airman Woods was staring at the clear sky around 9:30 p.m. when he saw a light flashing in that dark sky.
I see this object that's about a 30-degree incline over the horizon, and I thought, what's that? That doesn't look like any star I've seen. And it fluctuated, and it was a little different tint to any light that I'd ever seen. Watched it for a while, and it really didn't move, but the light glimmered. So I just walked inside and flipped the facility lights, which I think there was about 12 or 14 big canned facility lights on all corners of the building and 2 on the fence lines, and it was all operated by one switch in the flight security controller's office. Pretty sure it was Bill Holloman, flight security controller on duty at the time, and I walked in. I said, "Hey, Bill, come check this out." But he was on the phone talking to his wife. He just kind of waved me off, so I just did what I wanted to do and flipped the light 6 or 8 times. Well,
in other words, you were thinking it's some kind of joke, and you are flipping the lights to reply to whatever the blinking lights are.
yeah, my thinking was, like ships at sea, that prairie, there's nothing else out there north of South Dakota. So I just flipped the light 6 or 8 times and walked back out there, and the light flipped a little bit, it changed its intensity, and all of a sudden the damn thing went out. And I just stood there and went, what the hell, and all of a sudden it came back on. It just flipped back on, just like it flipped off and flipped back on. And I went, well, that's weird. I said, let's have some fun with this. I walked back in the office, and I said, man, you got to come check this out. Damn things flipped the light off at me. And I flipped my lights again 6 or 8 times. Same sequence. Walked outside, and it was off. Then all of a sudden, at about the same degree elevation, 30 degrees on the horizon, it was more north. When I came back outside, it was gone, or it was off. And then all of a sudden, at about the 1 o'clock position, boom, it just beamed back on, and I go, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
It's moving.
Yeah, it moved. It just moved in darkness. They imitate planets. And that's what it was doing. And I just happened to see it. So I go inside and I said, Michael, and I barely knew the guy's name. It's the first time we worked together, Michael Johnson. He outranked me. Anyway, I said, man, you got to come check this out. What? He was watching some TV, one of 3 channels. So I went back outside. He didn't come out for a few minutes, and I'm out there watching this thing. And it went off again for about a minute or 2. And I'm just really perplexed and kind of laughing to myself. I said, it's got to be helicopters. But I've never seen anything that bright do that kind of thing. The intensity of it was just different light than I can even explain.
What color would you say the light was?
Had a red, white, orange tint to it. So anyway, it pops back on. Michael Johnson comes out, and I said, hey, check that thing out, man. I said, I flipped the lights at it. It started out over here, then it went out, and I flipped the lights at it again. It went out, and then it reappeared over here about 3 o'clock to about the 1 o'clock position. He just looked at me like I was a fool. He was a Chicago boy. And I'm a Southern boy. And lo and behold, the damn thing went out. And he just said something like, whatever, man. And he walked back inside. And this started at about 9:30. It'd gone off and on twice, at least, maybe the 3rd time. And I flipped the lights at it about 4 times. As I'm standing there, it goes off. He goes back in, and I waited, and nothing happened. And it's about 10:15 now. And went back in, and I think I picked up a book, and I started watching some TV, or something. I guess it was about 12:15, 12:20. And all of a sudden, the MCC phone went off. And the phone, when it rang at the flight security controller's office, it was a direct line. So what it did is it went until you picked it up. There was no ringing or anything like that. That's what it did. So the ballman picked it up and said, yes, sir. And he says, yeah, we've got a SIT-4 at November 5. Well, a SIT-4 is a pretty serious alarm, and you don't have them very often. What that is an inner zone penetration of the alarm system, which are the 3 antenna array that's around and on top of the site. And then the C-plug is the inner zone alarm on a SIT-4.
Does SIT-4 stand for situation?
That is correct. Stands for Situation 4.
You are northwest of Rapid City by about how far?
55 miles.
There were these crews down below.
Yes.
In the missile silos, and you get a call from who?
It was the commander of the launch control facility, and he's underground directly under our feet at the launch control facility, which would have been November 1, as all of the LCS launch control facilities, which there was 15 of them at Ellsworth, all surrounding areas from the Badlands all the way north to Spearfish and Sturgis, South Dakota. So there was 150 missiles total, all spread out in all different areas. The flight security controller, who picked the phone up as it was buzzing directly behind him, relayed that there was a SIT-4 in progress, and it was at November 5, which happened to be the closest nuclear weapons silo closest to the November 1 launch facility.
Which is where you were.
Correct.
And when you heard this information, did you think this has something to do with that light that's been going on and off that I've been blinking at?
I didn't at that point. Well, damn, a SIT-4, we hadn't been here but 12 hours, and our first alarm is a SIT-4, which was pretty unusual. Usually didn't happen. I guess as the crow flies, November 5 is only about 7 to 8 miles directly away from the missile site, but of course we had to proceed down these clay roads, which are almost state highways in the Dakotas that are maintained extremely well. We proceeded toward Highway 79. A lot of the highways are built up high for the runoff of water and snow in the wintertime. And as we approached Highway 79, it was up higher than the clay road we were coming off of. And as I looked over to my right, as I'm the passenger in the vehicle, I'm looking out the window, and I looked to my right at about the 4 o'clock position as we were coming up to Highway 79, and I see this real bright glow from real low on the horizon over by November 5. So that would have been, 7 to 8 miles that I was seeing this glow, kind of like when you approach a large city at night,
right,
and you see the glow from the city. It was like that. And I looked at Michael Johnson. I said, hey, man, I think that object is over there at November 5. So I'm telling you, look at that. Where else have you seen light in Newell, South Dakota like that? Because at 6 o'clock, they roll the sidewalks up. Literally, there's one stop sign and one stop light on Highway 79 in Newell, South Dakota. That's it. So the next city south is Sturgis. As we get on 79, now it's moved from that 4 o'clock position. As we're going dead south, now it's at the 2 o'clock position. And as we go downhill toward Newell, which is about 7 or 8 miles to the stop sign, It's Orman Road, O-R-M-A-N, and we turned right at the stop sign. You know, I kept waiting to see it. I was kind of excited and scared at the same time. We go down about a mile and a quarter, and then that hardtop road drops back off on the clay, and it doglegs over to the left. And Linda, when we rounded that corner, this object was sitting on top of November 5. It looked like a mini sun. And honestly, the size of this thing was, the only comparison that I've said to people was the size of a super Walmart center, sitting 10 feet above the ground, right on top of November 5. And it was so bright, it was as if it was a sun sitting there.
Did it have color?
Yes, it was red, orange, and white. There were no hard edges. There were no surface features that I could see. There were no wings. There was no portals, no areas for propulsion. There was nothing like that whatsoever. We rolled up to the cattle gate, which is built in the ground, not a gate you had to open, and we stopped there at a 45-degree angle like we were going to do something. What could we do, literally? We sat right at the end of that cattle gate road in a tactical position, both frozen in what we were doing. We just couldn't move. I mean, the light got so bright, I could almost see through my hands. It was so bright. I had to close my eyes because the dashboard, everything in that vehicle was lit up, just like that movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when that mailbox scene.
Right.
It was like that. And then the atmosphere started evacuating after. The light never stopped, but all of a sudden we couldn't breathe. And it was as if somebody sucked all the air out of the area or out of the cab of that truck. I've never experienced anything like it. The only thing that I could do to get relief, and I knew I had to ask, was I rolled down that passenger window of that F-154 pickup truck, dark blue, U.S. Air Force security police on the side of it in letters. We had those stainless steel Western-style large mirrors on the side of our truck. And I took my mag light and I pulled myself with my right hand out onto the windowsill of that vehicle. And why I did that, I don't know. But I grabbed the blue bubbles that were on top of the vehicle with my left hand, and I had a mitten on. And I reached across with my right hand, and I flashed this object in the same sequence, I guess, that I did back at the LCF with my mag light. Blink, 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 blink. And I did that a couple of times, and I was, in my mind, I was asking for relief of this pressure, of this, whatever this was, which I can't describe. And then I just slinked down into that seat, and I'm a pretty good-sized fella in really good shape. And I remember putting my weapon between my knees. I just knew I had to secure it for some reason. I don't know why. I don't even know where my flashlight went, but I just dropped my head, and then I was out. And my last thing was I looked at Michael Johnson, and he was frozen looking straight ahead on the steering wheel. He was just looking straight out the front window. I guess I lifted my head up a couple of times, and I seen this black sphere bobbing in front of the truck like a beach ball, maybe a little bit larger than a beach ball, but it had these little vents all over it. It was like it was in layers. It was like a beach ball with lines on it, and in the middle of those lines, there was nothing there.
Not glowing any light.
All black. I just remember that bobbing in front of the windshield real fast, real quick. As I dropped my head, I kept sensing or feeling something, do not fear, is what I kept hearing. And I just kind of rotated my head to the right. It was as if I was in tunnel vision, and I see these little beings about 10 feet away from the vehicle coming toward me, and they've got little uniforms on. They had large heads, but not big bulbous heads. They did have large eyes. Behind them was a tall one, and he was more menacing. That's the one I centered on, and I felt fear from that one.
What did you see in the tall one?
Well, large eyes, just a bigger, meaner rendition of the two that were in front of him by a couple of feet. He was like coming up behind them. He was probably 2 foot taller than the ones in front of him.
What would be the height of the small and the large?
The tall one, probably 5.5, maybe 6 foot. And then the ones in front of him were about 4.5.
And what color uniforms were the small ones in?
They were in like a gray uniform. The one on the right, he had a belt. On the one that was on the left, he had this rod in his belt, and it had a tip that looked like a pencil, but it was glowing, and it was glowing yellow.
Did he grab it in his hand?
I never saw that. But the one behind him, he had something in the center of his chest. It was pulsating that same glow, that same color. And it was the size of your palm in the middle of his chest. It had a glow to it. It got brighter and dimmer.
What color on Earth would match the color of the glow from the taller being's chest?
Cross between orange and white. Tangerine, perhaps?
Was it glowing with a whitish light?
Yes, with a whitish light. And it wasn't super bright. It was dull, but it was that tint. When I looked at that and I kept hearing, do not fear, it was not words I was hearing because the windows were up. It was inside of me. I talked as if it was in water or something coming through me, like I could hear it inside my eardrums without any noise from outside whatsoever.
Thought words in your own mind. And what was the tall one wearing?
He had on a similar uniform, but it was different. It was belted, and it was more of a darker gray color. It's hard to look at anything else but the eyes. And the face of the tall one was different than the face of the two smaller ones. The face of the tall one was more of a rugged, more threatening type of look. Cheekbones were different, raised higher, jawline was much thinner and protruded differently, versus the smaller ones had more rounded features, even though they had larger eyes. And I can't remember the exact lengths of their arms, because as they walked, their arms weren't directly at their side. Their hands were in front of them, and they were three-fingered, 3 fingers and a thumb.
Did the taller one have scales like a reptilian?
No, did not. And the skin color was not gray. It was kind of a light blue gray, almost not an aqua, but a teal.
And we now have drawings of these teal blue beings. You're showing that this existed back in 1977, even if people weren't saying that they were looking at teal blue beings.
Wow, I had no idea.
Okay, now, are you aware that you are passing out? What happens inside?
It's as if I'm in tunnel vision and I'm allowed to see what I'm seeing, because I remember going completely dark and questioning my mind and everything about my existence ever. Everything. I mean, it all flashes in front of you, like loss of my father, my mother, just everything that was happening. It all came to me in one flash.
Mario, are you saying that you had something like a life review sitting in that military truck with this gigantic UFO and these extraterrestrial biological entities approaching you, that you were given through your mind's eye like a movie of a life review?
I've never looked at it that way, but yes, that's what it had to be. Really, it just shook me to my core. And it was so fast, I mean, I didn't think thought could move that fast. It was just so strange to have this tunnel vision, as if I was fighting to not close my eyes, but yet somehow being told to close my eyes. And I kept hearing over and over again, do not fear, do not fear. We are not going to hurt you. Do not fear.
Today, in 2021, September, as we are talking, do you have any more evolved information or knowledge about why the tall being and the shorter beings would have run through your life in your mind's eye at Ellsworth Air Force Base when they had a huge UFO over a missile site?
I really don't know. It was just being either at the right place at the wrong time or the wrong place at the right time. It did not end there, and it continued on.
What happened?
Well, I'd have memories. I remember somehow or another they got me out of that truck. I was on my back, and I remember lifting up my head 3 or 4 feet above the ground as if I was on a stretcher, being moved or something. And I still had no contact, or I had no thoughts of Michael Johnson, knowing that he was in that vehicle, still staring forward with this blank stare in his eye. And the next thing that I remember is being in something dark and cold, and it felt like a jello or something. And I felt completely alone. I had no idea where or what was going on. And a feeling of dread came upon me, and it really, really, really upset me.
As I talked with Mario about his experience and was looking at his sketches that he did in a spiral notebook himself. And he's trying to explain that the size of that huge orange fluorescent type sphere covered like something like a super Kmart. It reminded me of a phone call that I received back around 11 p.m. on November 7th of 1975. I remember it almost as if it were yesterday because it was from my brother. I was in Boston. I was doing medical productions for the ABC station there, WCVB. And I was up late that night working at a typewriter on a script that I had to produce the next morning. So when that phone call rang at about 11 o'clock, I grabbed it because I was thinking that maybe it was my family, something had happened was wrong. And what I heard, Linda, a huge UFO has set down over the missile silo here at Malmstrom Air Force Base. And my brother, without talking hello or anything, just went for a power speech about what had happened, that he had been at a wing party. He's a helicopter pilot. They all have orders when certain things happen like that, sit for. And my brother got his orders, and he was to take a high-ranking official in a helicopter immediately to go out near Kilo 7, where the Central Security was in communication with a sabotage alert team who was telling the Central Security Control that something the size of a football field, 300 feet in diameter, was set down low over Kilo 7, which is, they did letter numbers at Malmstrom, and the sabotage alert team didn't know what to do. So jets were scrambled. My brother is getting the person in the helicopter, and he's telling me all of this back in November 7th, 1975. And when the jets got there, whatever you want to say, the UFO, anticipating, already knew what was happening, started doing a vertical climb until it Dopplered off radar screens at 200,000 feet. And what is really interesting is what happened in the next approximately 48 hours. My brother kept me posted a little bit about things that he was learning. And then when Larry Fawcett did Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, he did this book, Clear Intent, that has the Capitol Dome lifting up with a flying saucer inside. And it says the government cover-up of the UFO experience. What does the government know about UFOs and why don't they tell us? And they asked me to submit a story about this with my brother. And so I'm quoting the inclusion of a much larger report that I had done in an interview with Denver Magazine that is in this book. And this is information that I got independently, and my brother also. Targeting teams, along with computer specialists, were brought to the missile site, Kilo 7, to check out the missile, and specifically, they wanted to check the computer in the warhead that targets the missile. Amazingly, when the computer was checked, they found that the tape had mysteriously changed target numbers. One of the jokes was that whatever it had been, it got changed to Washington. The reentry vehicle was then taken from the silo and brought back to the base. And then they changed out that entire missile and put in a brand new one. I think that some of the hardest evidentiary material outside of the work I did on animal mutilations has been what has happened on United States Minuteman missile bases where people have seen football field sized, super Kmart sized craft stop over gates, stop over missile silos, and then there are all kinds of stories about interactions between the UFOs and people stationed at these various places.
Like a jump cut in a movie where the scene just changes. Mario felt like he was moving in the air on his back about 3 to 4 feet above the ground, but nothing was holding him up. It was only air. Then he saw and felt something black and cold that reminded him of Jell-O. Some other human abductees over the years have also described a Jell-O substance in UFOs that they are told is a disinfectant for germs. Then came another jump cut from the cold, dark gel to Mario seeing the sun rising in the east. His watch showed it was after 6 a.m., but in his mind, it had just been 1 a.m. What happened in those 5 missing hours? Shocked and confused, Mario could see in the early morning sunlight a large white wall he had never seen before.
That white wall, I didn't know this at the time, I'd never been there before, was the backside of the Newell Lake Reservoir Dam that's north of Newell and about 11 miles away from November 5. And I had no idea what this white wall was. Well, lo and behold, the backside of that reservoir goes down about 40 to 50 feet. And as you get closer to the edge, that edge goes up 10 to 20 feet, and then you're on level ground. It's a great big, huge berm on the backside of that Newell Lake Reservoir. And we were at the bottom of that, sitting on it. Had we driven down in there, there's no place to turn around because there's about a 50-foot drop-off into another lake that's the runoff area for that dam, and there's nowhere to turn a vehicle around.
That it would never have been possible for you to have driven your military vehicle there in November of 1977.
That is correct. Still couldn't do it today. There's no way that a vehicle could turn around down there because it's just straight down off to the side to your right.
The implication is that the teal bluish beings transported you out of the military vehicle that you were in with Michael Johnson.
Correct.
Do you have any insights now about why the entities would have transported you to that narrow place in the reservoir?
Yes, I believe that when I first spotted that craft, when I walked out of November 1 launch control facility that night, I believe they were directly above it or right next to the Newell Reservoir Dam itself. I don't know what they would be doing there, but as the crow flies, that's where about they were located, as if they took me to a point where I first observed them.
And that was the flashing of the lights where all of this started and you thought it was a joke with some helicopter pilots.
Yes, ma'am. And then why use that mag light to ask for relief for what was happening to me? I just think they were the ones that were sent because that craft was much larger, just of only holding 3 beings. That craft was filled with stuff. And I've had dreams since that about the inside of that thing.
What did you dream?
I've dreamt I've been in a room where there's all kind of artifacts from Earth, like box TVs and old radios and antennas, and all this stuff sitting up on shelves. The first thing I saw was an old black and white box television set, probably a 19 by 19, something like that, with the knobs on the right side of the cabinet and the old style wood grain that was plastic. And I put my hand on it. And next to it was a sewing machine and a Selecta typewriter below it, a radio, a pedestal kind of light that people used to put from the floor to the ceiling. All this stuff was extremely old, and I just found it fascinating to be where I was. I was like, oh, wow, you've got one of these. You've got this IBM Selecta typewriter.
You are describing that you saw in some kind of a dream or in your mind's eye a section inside this craft that was filled with 20th century human technology.
Yes.
Did you ask any of them in your mind, what is this for and why have you taken me?
No. I said, why do you have all this old stuff? I remember saying that. I don't believe I got an answer, but they had me come with them down this hallway, and that's when I noticed the walls that were so active with circuits and lights. I didn't feel fear at the time. I was kind of amazed of the things that I saw in there. I mean, there was some really strange old stuff that we've used all of our lives, you know?
Like archaeologists from another planet came here and they were stuffing the UFO with technologies to study.
They did tell me when they put me there, you can look out the window. And I was afraid to look out the window. I didn't know what I'd be looking at, the earth or something else, you know? I really wish I would have now, but I've had dreams that have never gone away, that I've dreamt over and over and over. And I've dreamt of this situation and this whole thing that I've told you probably 50 times in my life in the last 43 years. And every time I wake up and sweat. But I only know that in that room I did not feel fear. The only time I felt fear was when I was having a lot of pain in my right wrist. And I still have pain in that wrist today. And I don't know why.
In the 50 dreams or so that you've had about seeing that room with all of the 20th century technology pieces stuck in it, on what must have been the big UFO craft, have you ever been given an insight from your dreams about why they, the non-humans, would be taking technologies from the 20th century? And why they were there near Ellsworth Air Force Base interacting with you and Michael Johnson?
I don't know. When I followed them, I kept looking at things as I'm walking out of that room because I found it so interesting because it was things that I had interfaced with, like box TVs where we changed the channel on it. I come out of this room, and I don't remember going through a door, but I remember in this short hallway, and the hallway was really tall. It was about 6 or 8 foot wide, but it was really tall. We turned to the left, and as I followed, we went to another doorway, and the door opened. It did not open with a swing-type door, but opened with a slide door. And it was already open when I got there. I felt as if I put my hand up on the frame of the doorway. And as I looked in, it was like fog in the whole area. And I was up in the fog, too, and I couldn't really see. And then it felt as if someone either took me by the hand or said this way, and I kept walking forward. But when I looked up, way up, then I saw this gargantuan interior that was multi-layered. It was like the whole interior of this craft had like rooms all over the walls. I mean, as far up as you could see, because it's just huge. But it was as if you're looking at a model of a house, and it's cut in half, and you see the open rooms in each level. Mm-hmm. It was like that. All these little guys were everywhere.
Well, do you think now, as we speak in early October of 2021, looking back at this event in November of 1977, that what the beings were trying to do was communicate to you, we have gathered this from you, from your planet, and that they are waiting maybe for reaction from you about these, but the bottom line is they are basically communicating, we study your planet, we gather from your planet, you are now on our craft, and we are showing you some of what we have taken from your planet, and you, we have taken from your planet.
There were so many other items. There was trophies in that room. There were just all kind of things, and some of them on the upper shelves were not stationary. They were floating. They were above the shelf, just kind of hanging there, floating.
Like neutralized gravity.
Yes. The TV did that. As I touched it, it moved. It had no weight to it.
Meaning that they have the ability to control gravity and inertial forces around any matter object that they want to.
I would say so.
What do you think the tall and short teal blue beings want from Earth and from humans?
I think the tall beings are the ones with the true mission or knowledge of what their mission is on this planet and who they're trying to please. I don't know. And the short beings are simply the guys that carry out what they want done. I don't think the short guys can grow up to be tall ones. I think they're two different species. I think they're like symbiotic. I don't think you see one without the other. Maybe they're protectors. I honestly don't know.
In abduction cases, there has been more clarity about the taller gray beings perhaps being organic, but that all of the shorter beings, 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, are artificial intelligence, cyborgs, androids, robots.
Honestly, the look in their eyes, now I don't know if their eyes are a filter, but when I was in that craft, I saw beings without those filters, and there were pupils there. I guess it's something that they can close or open, depending upon the light around them. But their pupils were extremely large, and they were round. They weren't reptilian or anything like that. So I wondered if that's a filter of some type. But there seemed to be, in all my midst of fear or the feelings that I was feeling, there seemed to be life there. I'm not sure if they were robots or not, but they didn't seem to be mechanical. Their movements seemed to be not quite smooth and not animated either, but they don't seem to move very fluid. So you might have something there.
Right. Some are robots, mechanical. Some are androids, biological, cyborgs, machine and biological. And then the tall grays, and gray is just a name now, like a common noun, because yours were not gray. We humans are limited by lack of knowledge. And that's what makes this important to ask you. What do they want from Earth and humans?
I believe understanding. I think they want to know what really makes us tick, what makes us warring, maybe our innermost thoughts, our innermost fears, our innermost everything, because I do think that they can separate the mind or the soul from the body and analyze it in a way that we can't even imagine. And that's why I associate these out-of-body experiences that I had directly after this whole thing happened, that very day before I was even taken back to Ellsworth Air Force Base. I went into a restroom, thought I was going to pass out. At November 1 launch control, I felt really strange. I felt as if I was going to leave my body. And I went and laid down, and I kind of settled myself down, and I remember my heart beating, and I felt as if I was moving down through my body toward my feet. And then I came back real quick, and I got back up and walked back out in the day room, and everybody was there asking me questions. And my buddy Michael Johnson, he was still out of it, and he was sitting in a chair. And I think the site cook was trying to get him to drink something, and they were really just trying to take care of him because we had a medical problem with him and didn't know what it was.
This is Michael Johnson, who was not functioning in the truck.
Correct.
Did you ever see him active and normal after that?
2 weeks later, he came to my apartment in Rapid City. For him to find me, he had to go find somebody that knew me and knew where I lived because we didn't all know each other. And he came to my apartment. Well, I knew at that time that he was not going back out into the missile field. He was not going back out as a security policeman. I don't know if he was disqualified medically or what exactly happened, but we sat down and we talked. He told me how freaked out he was, and he did remember, do not fear, and he was just literally locked up. He couldn't speak. It was really mentally disturbing to see a grown man, to not be able to function because of something that he's seeing. I think that the most interesting thing was once we drew without looking at each other, he went to my kitchen table, and I sat on the coffee table, and we drew what we saw. Drew the vehicle just like the drawings of which I sent you, and the craft sitting over the site. He said, I saw your glove on a shiny floor. And I said, what are you talking about? Remember, when I clutched the bubble on top of that security police vehicle, I used my left hand, and it had a glove on it.
Right.
He asked me if I had my right glove. I went and grabbed my bag, and I threw it out on the couch, just dumped it. Well, the left-hand glove was there, but my right-hand glove was gone. He told me he saw my glove laying on a shiny floor. So that's when we both looked at each other, and where in the hell were we on a shiny floor?
Mario, what is so important is what you were doing with that one gloved hand was you were reaching for the mag light because you were going to go beep, 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 beep to whatever was in the huge red, orange craft.
That's right. And it was the same sequence that I used at November 1 when I flipped the facility lights at it. I just went blip, blip, blip. No sequence, no SOS, none of that stuff. Just it was asking for relief of the pressure and the vacuum in that vehicle.
Right.
Because they sucked all the air out of that vehicle, and the light was so intense that I could barely look up at it. And I did have burns on the right side of my face and the back of my right hand, and that's where skin samples from the flight surgeon's office after my interview with all those people back at Ellsworth Air Force Base, that's where he took the skin sample from above my right eye and 2 samples off the back of my right hand.
Yes, and is it possible that these beings are so complex that they cannot do everything they want to do unless humans give them some kind of signal of permission, and that when you struggled with that one gloved hand to get yourself pulled up so that you could lift up the mag light and do those flashes of light, in a way you may have been saying, I am here, I give you permission, and that's when they took you and perhaps Michael.
In my mind, honestly, when I did that, I knew they knew it was me that flipped those damn facility lights at them back in November 1. I know they knew it.
Right.
And then I slid down in that seat, and then it all went from there.
This leads to, what do you think our Earth future will be? Did you get any pictures in your mind on that big craft about what they showed you of what they were going to do, wanted to do, any intention about Earth and the future?
A picture comes to my mind where I'm standing at a window frame and I'm looking out of a window, and off in the distance I see a huge nuclear explosion and a mushroom cloud just comes, just a fireball just erupts from the ground. And I'm looking straight out at it and I think, I've got to run. And then in that same thought, I realized, where am I going to run to? Besides the out-of-the-body experiences that particular day, that was the next closest memory that I had of visualization of anything from this whole ordeal. I see this mushroom cloud through a window.
Was there anything about the moment and where you were that might relate to the beings trying to communicate something to you about the nuclear explosion?
This could possibly be your future if things are not changed. If peace doesn't come into this world, this could possibly be everybody's future.
I'll end on that note because we've run late by the tech, but at least you've had an insight into the importance of understanding why are the non-humans here, and part of it might be that we are working with self-destructive weapons like atomic bombs that could kill us, and that we may also be part of their experiment and somebody else's experiment, and it goes on and on. There are vested interests in this earth, in humans, in studying, extracting genetic material, extracting molybdenum and trade, just like we would want gold and other metals. And there is, if you boil it all down, the non-humans have been harvesting from Earth for millions of years. We, Homo sapiens sapien, are just waking up to them for the first time, first through a world war, and now we're in the 22s. And what is coming down the pike, if any of you listen to Earth Files YouTube channel on Wednesday nights, that I just did a remote viewing recording with Buddy Bolton, who is very talented, and he has done contract work for the CIA, NSA, DIA. And he strongly sees something that surprised me because we had never talked about any of this. But during the recording, when he had done his remote viewing access, he said that he saw clearly the number 2036, 2036, that there would be a sustained pulsing of our sun that would do damage. I know of that as being called a micronova by some people, let's say on the classified side, and that there is concern that our very sun goes through cycles itself, that the non-humans know everything about, all of the cycles that affect this solar system, this Earth, that we are just beginning to understand. And that there is, in my mind, and I hope that tonight you will hold in your mind, whatever the non-humans are really up to, and they do seem to play 16-layered chess, to know exactly what a real motive is always going to be surrounded by a tremendous number of facets that make it so hard for human minds to understand. But that tonight, if I can leave you with this feeling that I am beginning to feel, that there are other intelligences that have been in this universe for millions, perhaps a couple of billion years. They're that much older. And they have a vested interest in promoting life, that organic life is the miracle in this universe, lots of AI, and that there is something that is extraordinarily special about Homo sapiens sapien as perhaps their biological experiment. But they have discovered that we have a core soul that they don't have. That there are things about humanity as a late experiment that they study, that there are parts of what we are they want. How do we bridge from now to X, where they can be in front of us, can be at conferences, can be on this planet, explaining, because they can speak verbally, the tall whites and the Nordics, what it is that they want to see and how they're going to protect us from things out there that would like Earth without humans. There are threats. But that I feel that I can say to you standing here from people that I know behind Mario and a lot of others, we do have allies. If we could just break open that huge world headline that we all need. We're not alone, and that all the governments begin to talk to us straight about who, what, and why. It might bring Homo sapiens sapien closer together instead of always wanting to war. Sorry for the technical problems, but I love you guys.